Hi, I'm Kathryn Lopez from the National Review Institute. Simone Rizkallah from the Philos Project. Thank you for being here. You run the Catholic Project. You ran a conference in Washington this week on anti-Semitism, specifically Catholics and Antisemitism.
Mhm.
Um, we also this week met with hostages,
Yes.
families, hostage families, and heard the stories of hostages that are still being held by Hamas, 9 families. Right after the conference, I want to talk about that. Cardinal Dolan, right after the conference, almost perfectly timed. Unfortunately, anti-Semitism is always timely. Had a piece in the Free Press talking about the sin of anti-Semitism in very clear terms. Not always that clear on the internet, which we'll get into
Right.
a little bit. But first, Simone, can you talk a little bit about the hostage families we met? I was particularly moved by Ofer, whose older brother is being held by Hamas, an IDF soldier who was taken from his tank when their military base was attacked. And Ofer was just so gracious and so grateful
Hmm.
that we even cared
Right.
enough to be there. And I remember he reminded me a lot of when right after we went into Afghanistan and then Iraq after 9/11, I went to Walter Reed a couple of times to meet with wounded warriors. And you feel as awkward as anything. You
Yeah.
don't know what to say. It's kind of like when someone has a close one loved one suddenly die. You don't know what to say. And really all they really need is your presence and just
Right.
a little normal, you know. But then they wind up putting you at ease more times
Right.
than not
Yeah.
and ministering to you. And that's what Ofer was doing. I mean, I asked him, his name and then he right away wanted to know where I was from. And it's just kind of normal conversation to make me feel at ease. And
Yeah.
so anyway, and the other thing before I let you talk is I was so moved when we were talking about people praying for his family, for his brother, obviously. He said that he is certain, and obviously he hasn't communicated with his brother. There was a hostage video, but no mutual communication. He said that he's certain that his brother knows of our prayers,
Wow.
and he believes that's sustaining him. And I just thought that was beautiful. But tell me, yeah, tell me your experience of that morning.
Yeah. Thank you so much for allowing me to be with you, Kathryn, and for your support, participation, obviously, in the Philos Catholic family at the Philos Project and with this conference in particular. Yeah, I heard all word on the street. You were a lot of people's favorites. So I just am very, very moved by that because I know how big your heart is with this subject. And I do agree with you. I think it's providential that Cardinal Dolan's article came out this week, and providential that with the conference, providential with the hostage families being in town. None of that was expected or planned. It was just how the timing worked out. So I think God's definitely behind all of this. I also was moved by him, and I was in that same like awkward feeling of, okay, like, I don't know what to say. All I can really say is our hearts are with you and that we are praying for you. And I was also moved, I can't remember her name, with the mother whose eldest son is still being held hostage. So there are 59 hostages left in Gaza. And so obviously it was not all of the family members or the parents that were
Right.
there, but she came right up to me after after the delegation presentations ended and gave me a big hug. And it was just, she was so natural. And I didn't expect to tear up. I really wanted to let the delegation of families know that Catholics were praying for them very intentionally. I think I mentioned that we did a campaign at Hallow on the Hallow app. There were over 3,000 people on the Hallow app praying for the release of the hostages for peace in the Near East. We did something through the Avila Institute, Dan and Stephanie Burke leading their whole spiritual community of praying over, thousands of people worldwide praying there for Lebanon and for Israel. And again, like prayer is really what unites all of us in our humanity. And that was the thing that really struck me in meeting the families is that, and one of the, fathers said it too, we can talk about politics all day long. But at the end of the day, these are human people who have lost their children
Right.
and some are getting signs of life that their kids are alive, others are not sure. And for every day to pass not knowing when they're coming home, if they're coming home, is heart-wrenching. So it felt like a sacred privilege, as a lot of this work feels like to me, to be able to just be there and say that you're not forgotten and that we're with you and we don't carry the burden in the same way that you are. How could we? But I just kept envisioning my own family members and imagining what that would be like to be missing the most sacred, precious people in your life,
Right.
having no idea. And
And
then,
they're being
yeah,
held by Hamas, this heinous
yeah,
terror organization.
yeah. And then pulling out their phones and playing like voice notes, messages from them, videos, because part of the terrorism is the psychological abuse as
Right.
well as the physical and sexual abuse. So that's hard. Is this the last voicemail I'm going to get from my son, who one of the fathers, if you remember, was, his son was saying, "I love you, I love you, I love you," with such an urgency. Was that the last "I love you" he was ever going to hear from his son's voice? Just heart-wrenching.
And yeah, I think it was Guy Gilboa Dalal's father you're talking about. He was taken from the music festival, and it was his
Right.
first music festival that he had ever been to. And his mom was there too, with us the other day. And she gave him a hug before he left, and he took a
Mm.
selfie and sent the selfie to her before
Mm.
the attack. And so she has that, not knowing if it's the last time she ever hugged her son. But we heard that video where in Arabic, kill him, kill
Yeah.
him, we hear. And I was also moved because Marave, his mother, came up to me at the end and just gave me a hug. It was
Hmm.
the same experience you had, but with a different mother. Just grateful that we were there and that we cared and that we listened.
It's
And
hard to
trust
look at the
we would.
moms. Yeah, it was hard to look at the moms because the moms were looking down a lot.
Right,
Whereas,
I noticed that too.
did you notice that? Yeah, how
Yeah,
could
you
they?
kind of saw complementarity at work because you would, some of
Right,
the couples were there, so you saw mom and dad was the protector and me, and in some cases talking in more, it was a dad who brought up, this happened before, never again, we said, and
right, 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 right.
violence is contributing to it, and but the moms are just want to hug their kids again.
Yeah,
um
not as easy to compartmentalize as you said. That
right.
comp. Yeah, and yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, it was such an honor to be able to spend a little time with them. And it's a reminder, as you said, yes, we're talking about big political issues, but we're also talking about moms and dads and brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles, and yeah.
Right.
And I was also, we were both moved. We very quickly put together a little prayer vigil the night before the conference,
Yes.
and there were Franciscan University of Steubenville kids who happened to be on spring break in DC.
Like
And
more providential timing. That's
yeah,
another providential point.
right. I had no idea. You had no idea. And you had organized a conference at Franciscan University, Philos and Franciscan, that was providentially timed. It was scheduled before the attacks, and
Right.
it actually happened a week or two after the attacks, and but had been previously scheduled again. And so we wanted to tie it to Franciscan a little bit, just because there was a lot of beautiful conversation between Jewish leaders and Catholic leaders at the conference. And the kids happened to be in town, and not all of them knew what was going on, frankly,
Right.
with the
Right.
hostage situation. And so it gave them an opportunity to learn what was going on. And a number of the students thanked me, said that they were honored to be able to pray for these families. And we prayed for the Beavis family in particular, who the
Right,
dad was released, the mom and the two boys were killed,
right.
and including baby Kafir.
Baby, yeah.
And the Sharabi family, people may have seen Eli Sharabi, who was recently released by Hamas, who looks like a Holocaust survivor. Um,
Right.
and we showed this cartoon that Sharabi presented Donald Trump the other day in the Oval Office, which is the first panel is Holocaust survivors, three Holocaust survivors,
Mm.
and then the second panel is three Hamas survivors.
Wow.
Sharabi being one of them, and yeah, the message being, look what we're letting happen again.
I wish I mentioned that prayer service, Holy Hour with the Franciscan kids. I wish I mentioned that when I was addressing the delegation. I think they would have loved to hear that too.
Oh, but you communicate a lot, and I do want to ask you, and we can get into what exactly Philos and Philos Catholic is. Full disclosure, I've gone to Israel with you,
Yes.
thanks to Philos, and I was grateful. That was my second trip to the Holy Land, and it's always for so many reasons incredible to be there, to walk where Jesus walked, but also to I think I was talking in the green room to somebody about this. Um, I think you were included. I find that maybe the most peaceful place in the world is Old City Jerusalem at 4:30 in the morning
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
you have, and I think I told the story actually on the panel, now that I think about it, where when I was on the Philos trip, I was tired as you are, and so my first morning, my original plan was to go to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where we believe Calvary was, and go pray and go to Mass when it opens up, and which would get me out of my hotel and for something in the morning. And I hit snooze, or wanted to hit snooze. I think I did hit snooze. Then I hear the Muslim call to prayer. And I'm like, you know what? If the Muslims can get out of their beds and pray, I do. I was so glad I did. And as soon as you get within the walls, you realize that the only people who are up right now are Jews and Muslims and Christians who are going to pray. And there is
Amazing.
something really powerful about that.
Yes.
There really is.
There, and it's not the perception people have on the outside who've never been to Israel, to the Holy Land. You have to be there and experience that to understand the paradox of this place that's so conflict ridden, and yet your personal experience there is one of tremendous, overwhelming peace from the grace of God. I mean, it's just you have to experience it to know what we're talking about.
People kind of do think you're crazy when you say it.
Yeah, but then they go and they're like, "Oh, now
And
I know what
they,
you mean."
yeah, they realize. So
Yeah.
when we met the families, you felt the need to apologize. Can you
Yes.
explain that?
Yeah, maybe that's too bold to apologize on behalf of Catholic all of Catholic history and Christendom, but I wanted them to know that our Catholic community is aware of the bad history, of our not so great moments in history when it comes to Jewish Catholic relations. I want them to know. I think it's very trust building for them to know that just as they are aware, and probably even more aware than we are, than average Catholics are, that we're aware of that bad history and that we're very sorry for it.
Mhm.
Catholics of goodwill who are aware of it. Many Catholics of goodwill are not aware of it, and so we mean sorry for what? But if you look even into the history on even a superficial level, you can see that when we say that the church is broken, the human part is broken, that's a deep brokenness. And And we have to make spiritual reparation for that. And I really appreciated that about what you said, what Maggie Phillips said in the third panel of the conference, that, the Sacred Heart of Jesus, First Friday, First Saturdays, that this is an opportunity to make reparation in the body of Christ for the ways in which the church did not act very Christian toward our Jewish brothers and sisters. So we don't need, Jesus doesn't need us to defend him. We just need to speak the truth in love, and that is a great way to make friendship and at least build trust, if not friendship. I wanted them to know that.
And I should add, Maggie Phillips is a Catholic who works for the Tablet,
Yes.
and writes about religion and ecumenical issues, among other things. And she was very beautiful. And yes, talking about this Catholic concept of reparation, which
Yep.
is not giving money to egregious groups, it's in prayer and sacrifice, acknowledging sins that have been committed and offering those prayers and sacrifices to help with the healing to make up for the sin.
Right.
And it is an imitation of Jesus dying on the cross for our sins. Obviously
Amen.
not
Right.
that,
Right.
but it's a participation in that and an imitation of that. And it can be extremely powerful when entered in with humility. And I thought it was important, we can talk a little bit about social media and anti-Semitism there, which is not you don't have to look very far for. I saw Meghan McCain. I don't know exactly what she was. There are lots of possibilities. I don't know what exactly she was referring to, but tweeted out the other night that she was just overwhelmed by the anti-Semitism
Yeah.
on social media. And I I noted your apology to the hostage families,
Mhm.
and people were making fun of you for doing so and for carrying water for Jews. And don't you know that Jews killed our Lord? And I'm screaming at the computer, yes, Jesus was a Jew. Are you aware of that? And
Right.
it comes from, you click on people's bios and it's a Catholic dad, or, the tweet before that was about Jesus dying for our sins. But
Right.
the
Right.
message I have to take home every Good Friday is I killed him. It was my
Right.
sins. It's not those people, who did it. It's me.
Right.
That's the
Right.
message. And so another timely aspect of anti-Semitism is the Christian meditation on what actually did happen at the crucifixion here.
Right. 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 Right.
This is not what they did. This is what I did. And anyway, Maggie Phillips was really beautiful, just talking about, those personal interior things that we can do in addition to, I know I added simple things like if you see a man with a kippah, a
I
yarmulke,
love that. Yep.
just say, I'm sorry.
It
You
means so much. It means so. I've never had a bad reaction because I've had those. I was glad you said that in the panel because I've had that. I remember being on a metro shortly after and having that same like, oh, do I make it weird? Do I bring this up? Do I just like politely smile so they know that I'm a friend, even though I'm not going to say? And it never had a bad reaction to that. I mean, it's very, very well received, and I'm glad that I'm very happy that Jonathan Silver we know one of our Jewish panelists in the first panel said, you know, I'm more worried about Christians, about Catholics than I am about Jews with anti-Semitism because, like as you said, Kathryn, this is my sins that contributed to Jesus's passion and death. It's anti-Semitism is a sin, and for an anti-Semite, that's very problematic on their soul. The
know,
Jewish the Jewish person that you're directing your Jew hatred to, that is unfortunate, something we have to fight, but like your own salvation, as St.
right.
Paul says, to work out in fear and trembling is very real. And if you have a spirit of contempt and condemnation, towards this group of people, which are Jesus's people and Our Lady's people, and Saint Joseph's people and the Apostles' people, then maybe that's a good Lenten examination of conscience. Am I harboring a spirit of hatred, of contempt, that is not what we associate with the Spirit of God?
Jonathan saying that, and Jonathan is at the Tikva Fund, and he's the
Mm-hmm.
editor of Mosaic magazine, and just a wonderful, wonderful man. Who was also on our trip, and
He was. Yeah.
Jonathan and I had a really beautiful conversation, right under the altar on Calvary at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, because I guess I had been there earlier in the morning, and so so the group went up, and I just sat downstairs with him talking, and anyway, just it was a beautiful memory. But Jonathan specifically saying that he worries most about the anti-Semites was akin to things I've heard Christians who have been targeted by ISIS say.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one woman saying, "Thank God for ISIS," and you do a double take.
Wow.
This woman is
Yeah.
crazy. What is she talking about? And what she's talking about is, she explains, I never knew that my faith in Christ was the most important thing in my life until I had to make a choice. Was I going to renounce
Wow.
him or
Wow. Wow.
not?
Wow. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so Jonathan, is basically saying, look, unfortunately, anti-Semitism comes with the territory. Jews deal with it. Uh,
Right.
not right, not just, but the reality. But it's those anti-Semites I'm most worried about because we know who our God is. We know who we're about. They clearly don't,
Yeah.
And I would add, um, a lot of us, I'm sure, and children don't grow up wanting to be anti-Semites, right? And many people who harbor anti-Semitism don't necessarily think themselves as anti-Semites. I know just from a couple of days of tweets and things from me on anti-Semitism, there are a lot of people who seem to just believe that the Jews killed Jesus, and so I'm wrong for, defending them in even their humanity. Um,
Right.
but I imagine that's coming from some sense of righteousness or something. Not, they don't see it as hatred, right?
Right. Right.
I would imagine in most cases. I'm sure there are exceptions to that. But I think that means that it's incumbent on all of us to make sure that there's nothing we're doing passively that's contributing. Again, the
Mhm.
silence, the indifference. I think I think I shared at the conference too that I had posted a picture of the Bebis boys
Right.
on Facebook, and people didn't know who they were and made assumptions about who they were. And when I tell that to Jewish friends, they say, well, people can't help if they don't know, which is absolutely true. But I think we have to know.
We have to know. Yeah. I was glad that came out in the conference. I was very glad. I wasn't sure if it would. I'm glad it did because you can't control what happens. But the absolute, what hurts so much is not so much the haters. We can always expect that. What hurts is the indifference of good people.
Right, right.
And that's why I feel the sense of urgency. Most of our friends, contacts, networks, they're not anti-Semitic, but they're indifferent because they maybe don't know the extent of the problem or the extent of the growing problem. And that's where like we have our work cut out for us. And also to stir, I always wonder, Kathryn, if I were Jewish, what it would be like to be seeing all this, to be so, so hated and
Right.
to know that this is like, I have a priest friend goes, I hope this is like this is probably just another trend. I'm like, yeah, but it's a trend that resurfaces all the time. So can we call it a trend?
Yeah,
Because it
not a
keeps
trend.
coming up. It's not a trend.
Always timely.
So I really try to like put myself, you know, how does that feel? I know what it feels like to be an Armenian and for the global community to not really care. I know what indifference feels like as an Armenian Christian, but for that spirit of apathy, I know what that's like. Spirit of just like hatred and accusation and I don't know if I could handle it to be. I don't know I could handle it with the same kind of peace and calm that our Jewish friends do. They're so kind. And when I'm like, I don't know that I would like any Christians, you know, of course,
Right.
not every Jewish person likes Christians, but
Right.
all the Jews I know like me and that are friends with me, you know. So I don't know. I just don't know that I could be as loving and patient as I've been witnessed to by our Jewish friends.
And I think your apathy point and your comparisons to Armenians is really important because, of course, their Armenian Christians have been subject to genocide before and again.
Yeah.
But most people don't hate Armenians. Most people don't even know who they are.
We're not Albanians, I'll tell you that.
uh, or you're Turkish or you're some, but you're Middle East vaguely. Oh, wait, there are Christians in the Middle East? That's a whole nother topic. The indifference people in ignorance of the fact that they're Christians, and there always have been Christians in the Middle East. But that's a topic for another day. But mostly it's if you start to read, and this is your life, because this is an issue that's very close to your heart when you start paying attention or you start getting someone paying attention to the plight of Armenians, it's just so complicated politically
Yeah.
that it's hard to pay attention. And likewise with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, you know, I think people find it hard or don't know if they can separate maybe Israel isn't perfect with, you know, um, Hamas is clearly evil and
Yeah.
then just like take it out of the political context, anti-Semitism is evil, hating a Jew,
Right. We have to
right?
untangle it from all that.
Right. We
Just
can
let
have two conversations at the same time.
Exactly. That's hard. That's hard sometimes for people to do, right? Again, I came home from meeting the moms and dads, just normal mom. These people don't run the IDF. They're not in the Knesset, right? Like they're just moms and dads that lost their kids, right? And
Right.
I mentioned to a friend, oh my gosh, like I'm trying to recover emotionally from this heart-wrenching experience. And as I predicted immediately, well, but you know, Palestinian people are, I'm like, I absolutely agree. Palestinian people are suffering. I don't want them to suffer. I have compassion for them too. But can I have this moment to talk about this situation for the humanity of these people, right? Who are not rejoicing in their children's death as martyrs, as many people in Gaza and people who are connected to Hamas are, which is not every Palestinian, but we have to be able to untangle from the political webs and look at the humanity of what's going on and talk about it very clearly. Anti-Semitism is a sin. It's a moral and spiritual disease.
Yeah, and again, as you say, they're life for a Christian in Bethlehem is not a lap living in the lap of spiritual or material luxury. You know,
Right.
in addition to talking about, land and Palestinian Muslims and Palestinian Christians and but at the same time we are living at a time where at say 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, Eastern Standard Time, or whatever Eastern time we're in now, you can log on to the internet and see that Hamas is preparing the stage for the release of new hostages, and they're celebrating their emaciation or their
Hmm.
death. Fathers are bringing their sons to celebrate, to cheer, to sing. This is happening. And that
Right.
is not to demonize Palestinians or to demonize Muslims. It's to acknowledge the fact that Hamas is doing that and Hamas is part of the culture there. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean everyone is participating. That does not mean that everybody is evil, but it means that there is an evil that
Hmm.
exists in our day. And if we are indifferent to that, we are indifferent to evil. And that seems kind of simple where you have to where
Hmm.
what side you have to be on, the anti-evil side, which again doesn't dictate what your politics is going to be on this issue, but it does dictate that you acknowledge facts.
Yeah, and I love what one of the dads of the hostages said, you know, this is a question of right and wrong.
Right.
And to your point about the moral clarity that's needed. And then he said something that, you know, I've been thinking about since I was 10 years old, which is that Europe is being flooded with, again, not every Muslim, radical Islamism, right? That's a different thing. That's very real. And you know, he didn't seem to be saying it in a vindictive way, but like if you're unwilling to engage the urgent need to distinguish between right and wrong now and what this is really about, because we can wrap it all in like Israeli versus Palestinian, Arab, blah 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 blah, but really it's evil and not evil, right? And I'm not calling one side evil and one side. I'm just saying within everything is this distinction between good and evil, and Europe is going to have to face that when they're confronted with the same enemy, which they already kind of are dealing with, but will in the coming decades have to deal with even more dramatically. And then let's see if there can be apathy when that's happening, when it's personal to you.
And we don't have to go to Israel or Europe. In my New York City,
Right.
there are regularly attacks on obvious Jewish people, particularly Hasidic Jews. They tend to be the most obvious as part of the reason. But I mean, I have friends who, moms who have been subject to violence just because they're obviously Hasidic moms walking with their
Yeah.
kids. And that's not okay. Um,
Right.
there was an impromptu, violent outrage just a couple of weeks ago on the streets. I think it was in Brooklyn, against Jews. This is something that happens. And then, it's just the simple stuff that you see on the internet. And there are some prominent names on the right who play around with anti-Semitism. And yeah, we need to say say what it is,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
not treat it casually. And I do want to get back to the conference that you organized and emceed, and because first of all it's available online, and so it's making a difference. It's countering some of that rot online. And I wanted to ask you, well, first I wanted to point out one of the things I put together a little packet for the Franciscan kids before they prayed, so they would have some meditations on what John Paul II, what Benedict
Mm,
XVI, what Pope Francis has said about anti-Semitism, very clear about it being evil, about
right.
being sin. Cardinal Dolan echoed that in the Free Press, not in a Catholic publication, making sure that not only do Catholics know this, but people of goodwill know this, that
Right.
all people know this. And but yeah, Christians, you better know that. And Catholics, you better know that in a
Right.
specific way when you're hearing it from your leaders. What was your motivation besides the obvious of, calling a spade, so to speak? But and what was the highlight for you in that conference on Monday?
Oh my gosh. Highlight? I'm not sure. I think the highlight was I'm going to regret this answer because I'm sure when I think about
Sure.
this later, I'll say, "Oh, I wish I
One
said
of the
this."
highlights. One of the
I think the highlights is that the spirit in the room. It felt that people were really interested, supportive, wanting to be there, and really there was not a spirit of apathy. And I guess if you're coming to this kind of conference on Catholics and anti-Semitism, you certainly don't have a spirit of apathy, but it was perceivable in the room. And of course, like you and the other speakers and panelists are we're on mission together. That friendship was felt there. All the speakers stayed all day to listen to each other, to talk to each other in the green room, to really like have some spiritual intelligence, ask the Holy Spirit, like in this, and I'm glad Mary Eberstadt said this in the panel, this historic moment. I think she nailed it. This is a historic moment. We have spent centuries of not very trustworthy Jewish Catholic relations. And then we have John Paul the Great, the fourth pope in all of our history to be called the Great, in this moment, who is such an advocate of the Jewish people and Jewish Catholic relations, and along with Pope Benedict and Pope Francis. But John Paul II he's a saint, right? We declared him a saint. So on a whole other level, right? And really
He
lived,
was the first pope
he
to go to the synagogue in Rome.
exactly first pope to go to the synagogue in Rome, second pope to go to Israel. So it just such a this is Nostra Aetate in our time. This is our time. I want to get past, and Jonathan Silver said this as a Jewish man, I don't want to keep talking about anti-Semitism, right? We got to get this out. And we have to, because pagan anti-Semitism is also a thing. And this is really about that. This is about paganism versus monotheism. And if we're going to go straight to the root and marrow of this spiritual evil. So like how fascinating, how interesting. What if Jewish Catholic relations really wasn't about anti-Semitism anymore, but about like, how are we related to each other? Yes, we have this big elephant in the room, Jesus. I think he's God. You don't think so. But man, we have a lot in common. And there's a whole pagan world that we need to unite and like propose truth, goodness, and beauty to. And we can do that together. And there's a mystery of Israel that St. Paul, the Jewish apostle, said that we ought to grapple with and prophesy with. And there's a mysterious prophetic element to this friendship we have with each other. My goodness, what would the church look like if Christians were switched onto that level of reality? That's why I get out of bed in the morning. I don't get out of bed in the morning because of anti-Semitism. That's just what I have to do, right? I get out of bed in the morning because for Christians to live the gospel means something about the Jewish people and Judaism really matters for me, and not in a theoretical way, in a concrete way. It matters. They're not just a symbol, they're living and breathing, and I know them. And wow, in my life alone, my Jewish friends have made my life so rich and meaningful. And I had my first friend from college who's Jewish. Her mom was tuning in. I haven't seen her mother in 20 years. And I haven't talked to her in 20 years. And she sends me a text message saying, "This was so meaningful. Thank you for doing this for us."
Oh,
I mean, I don't know what else to say. So for me, that's one highlight. I guess I went on and on, but I think I wanted to have, this is why I wanted this and why I wanted it in like a half day. I wanted to have a primer for every normal Catholic. I know that it's unlikely, apart from the grace of God, for these anti-Semites who need to just delete their social media and just get part of their actual real life and get some healing and deliverance and whatever exorcisms they need, we all need deliverance, but you know what I mean? You know, I wanted to have something for normal Catholics to go, oh my gosh, I didn't know this was a
yeah,
problem. It
yeah,
is.
yeah.
And my goodness, Mary Eberstadt and Trent Horn and Jonathan Silver, they're showing me how it's a problem. I had no idea. Most Catholics don't. Number two, wait a minute. There's a whole like not so great history. My friend Joe Heschmeyer was on he's an apologist at Catholic Answers. A Jewish man who wants to become Catholic said, I'm thinking about becoming Catholic, but I'm noticing all this anti-Semitism online. And if I join this thing, does that mean I have to be anti-Semitic because I'm Jewish and I can't do, and so, Joe is brilliant and answered like, no, like what you're seeing is not the gospel. It's not what our church teaches. Sorry, it's happening. And sorry that we do have this bad. Let's stop pretending that didn't exist or romanticizing it. It was bad for a while and in many, up and down. Not that there were great people, great saints, great moments. But again, like we're not going to argue with indisputable history here. So I really wanted well-meaning, good, well-intentioned Catholics to one, be switched on to the problem, to know what it means civilizationally. When there's an upsurge in anti-Semitism, that means there's an upsurge in a diabolical spirit, and that's saying something bigger about the larger culture. Two, what's our history? Okay, not everybody has to become a historian, but you at least have to know. That's a grown-up Catholic faith, not a childish faith, a grown-up faith. And then three, the panel you were on with Maggie Phillips and Phil Delitsky and James O'Reilly, like we just live in our local communities, in our real lives, and we should know who the Bibas family is and why it matters. And we should be doing reparation for centuries of anti-Semitism, right? How do we just foster good friendship and build up, what Rabbi Jonathan Sacks says with these creative minorities? How do we do that to propose, we're losing, the Catholic Church in America loses more members than any other religious tradition. That is heartbreaking to me. And what if this shifted? What if we began to focus our energy on informal apostolate, as my friend Father James Brent says, right? That we just reach out to people in a real humane way and propose Jesus, propose the gospel. What good can we do? So I wanted to have like a product, like, hey, you want to get brought up to speed on this? Here's this half-day conference. It's just like a primer.
I loved what you said about, and Jonathan Silver said as well, is about we don't want to be talking about anti-Semitism forever. I I want to be having a conference with Rabbi Soloveichik, who was at the Franciscan conference Philos did, and talk about marriage and family and how we
Right.
help help marriage and family and build a culture of marriage and family because he's awesome on that topic. And I sometimes joke that Sully, as we call him, or he insists we call him, but I always tell him as a good Catholic schoolgirl, I got to call him Rabbi Sully. Um, anyway, and he does that as a grace because his name's so hard to say. But
So
anyway,
sweet. He's so sweet.
he's so sweet. He knows Catholic theology better than a lot of Catholics do. So there are many
That's
conversations
right.
we can have with him that don't have to be about anti-Semitism.
Well, yeah, I was so blessed. It was the highlight of my January and maybe the year to speak to 100 Jewish college students. And Rabbi Soloveitchik was there. And they said, "Oh, Simone, like what book can we read to learn about Christianity?" And I mean, it was so sweet. And I'm like, I don't know, let me think about it. But I love Joseph Pieper's book, Leisure, the Basis of Culture, and you guys are Sabbath keeping Jewish kids, so you might. And they were like, "Oh, we have read that.
I
That's
couldn't
so
believe
good."
you said
I was like,
that.
"Oh, okay. Well, I have nothing to offer you because you guys need to actually to be teaching me." And to your point that like, yes, let's have conversations about leisure, keeping the Sabbath, marriage,
Most
family,
Catholics,
like
I'm willing to say, are have not read that book.
yeah, exactly. And Rabbi Soloveitchik said that he had read in his youth every C.S. Lewis book.
Yeah.
I mean, gosh, we could be having so much fun at conferences. We got
I'm
to get
sure
past.
I haven't read every C.S. Lewis book.
Right, but he loved C.S. Lewis, wanted to be the Jewish C.S. Lewis, but knew he couldn't because who could be C.S. Lewis? I mean, the humility, I mean, because Rabbi Soloveitchik is brilliant, but
And
it just
hysterical.
unbelievable. And I wished that when I was there that I wish that more Catholics could see those kids. What I heard, what I experienced was so beautiful. Some kid asked, the culture is so hedonistic and sexually saturated. How do we live chastity? I mean, yes, another great thing we could be talking about. There's so much we could be pursuing together. Our values come from the Hebrew Bible, you know. So let's do it. Let's do the thing.
And I should mention for Catholics in particular who are looking for something this Lent, besides meditation on anti-Semitism, Father James Brent has a series, Contemplata, I think is what it's called.
Right,
Just
right. Love it.
so if you Googled like Father James Brent and
Mm-hmm.
deacons and contemplation, it would come up. And And the other thing I wanted to say, you mentioned speakers hanging around for the conference, and you don't see that often. Usually people come in, give their talk, and leave. George Weigel was there all day. He was
Yeah,
the last
so
speaker.
grateful for that. So sweet.
Russell Hittinger from Catholic University, who's another kind of legend in philosophical circles, was there all
So
day.
epic. So
Yeah.
epic.
I was always also struck by people wanted to be there because they thought it was important. And
Yeah.
so Sister Dee Dee Byrne was there for just a little while. I don't even know if you knew she was
I
there.
didn't know she was there. And then I saw a picture and I went, what?
Yeah, and
So
there was a
amazing.
lot of that. People who could only be there for an hour or
Hmm.
whatever it was. And they just thought it was important to note that this was happening and be present for whatever they could. So thank you again for doing that. And
Thanks for being
again,
part of it.
go to the Philos Project website. Is it on your YouTube?
It's on the original live stream link where people are live streaming is on the Catholic Information Center website, but then we've also reshared it on the Philos Project website, so you can find it in either place.
Gotcha.
And eventually, maybe by the time, eventually we'll have the panels on individual videos if you wanted to not watch it in one big chunk or look for the timestamps, but we're working on that right now. So yeah, share it. And seminary directors, formators, youth ministers, especially of Gen Zers that need to, what is going on out there, especially if you're on social media. Yeah.
Yeah, and I do think it's particularly unfortunately, it's timely in the news. It's also timely spiritually, as we approach Holy Week. Um to remember yeah, there are real practical things about anti-Semitism that are poisonous. Um and there are also poisonous spiritual things about it, and we want to combat all of those.
Right.
And yeah, also people, I know Philos, I think, does a weekly email. You can sign up for that.
Yes, please.
You're
Philos Catholic too. Yeah, there's Philos Project, the main site, and then there's Philos Catholic. So you have to go on the Philos Catholic page if you want to have the one that's specifically for Catholics.
and you've got you're on X and Facebook and
Yep.
Instagram. Yeah, I know.
I don't think we're on Facebook, but we're on X and Instagram. And if anybody wants to sign the Coalition of Catholics Against Anti-Semitism statement, you can go to catholicsagainstantisemitism.org and read the statement and sign it. We'd love to have you join us.
And I imagine there's going to be future Catholics and anti-Semitism programming. Unfortunately, it will be necessary. And so, to keep in the loop,
Yes.
I do encourage people to sign up. I also encourage people to sign up, and we're getting no shekels for this.
No
The
one's
people who will
paying.
comment,
Right. The Illuminati is not paying for this
yeah.
conversation. Yeah.
We mentioned Jonathan Silver a lot. The Tikva Fund is a great resource. Check out their website. And every Friday, I get an email from Mosaic magazine, and they're long form. So I usually only manage to read something, but I'm always grateful I read something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
Amazing.
read it because it comes into my inbox because I signed up. So I would encourage that as well. And so, Simone, thank you so much.
Thank you,
Um,
Kathryn. Thank
and
you.
and I do promise to get back to you to focus on another time on Armenian Christians
Oh,
and what's
thank
going on
you.
there. Um,
Thank you, Kathryn.
and you can sign up for updates from the National Review Institute as well. So you will see that, and please share this on with friends on social media or elsewhere, as well as the conference that we had at the Catholic Information Center the other day, thanks to Philos. And thank you for making the time to listen to
Thank you,
us.
Kathryn. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Likewise. Bye bye.